the title of today's message is Love, Reflecting the Character of God. Now, the reason, we've been talking so much about love and taking so much care in the last few weeks to talk about love is, not only is it the greatest or one of the greatest commandments, it's a pretty extraordinary force, if you had to label it as something. And when you sum up all aspects of life, love outranks its counterparts in every category that it's a part of. And so I just want to read a couple passages from the Bible that actually kind of highlight how crazy, extraordinary, awesome love is. In Colossians 3, it says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." In Romans 13, it says, "Let no debt remain outstanding, except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law." In 1 John chapter 4, it says, "So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him." And in 1 Corinthians 13, it says, "If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing." And so many others in the Bible that talk about love. And at its purest form, love is the virtue that binds all other virtues together. When God gives us the law in the Old Testament, the law is like a list of commands that total to the hundreds. Love alone fulfills all of those laws. Love is the root of our true purpose. At its purest form, love is the most powerful motivation. God is love. The very nature of God is love. And as God is eternal, love is eternal. And for us, as we are made in God's image, it's crucial that we work with him to make love our nature as well. And so, the task was to, try and come up with a solid definition of this awesome thing that is love. And, personally, prior to studying love in preparation for the message, although I felt I had a solid understanding of love, which is developed through different life experiences in the life of a Christian, if I had to really articulate, what love is in a clear and concise definition, not gonna lie, it would be hard to do that. But after hours of study in an attempt to bring it all in, bring the various elements and layers of love into a single definition, it came down to this: love is the stable commitment of the will towards someone or something perceived to be good, motivated by the desire toward that perceived good, and expressed in a pattern of choices that are collectively governed by the value that we've assigned to that perceived good. I'll say it one more time. Love is the stable commitment of the will, that's our will, towards someone or something that we have perceived to be good, and that commitment motivated by the desire toward that perceived good, and expressed in a pattern of choices or actions that are collectively governed by the value that we've assigned to that perceived good. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but you know, pretty much it's broken into 5 different parts. It's perception, desire, evaluation, commitment, and action. So love comprised of those 5 things. So, you know, the aim today is to go over all those things, you know, to build a better understanding of love. So first, there's perception. Love begins when you perceive something as valuable, beautiful, meaningful, or worthy. Worthy of your attention, protection, pursuit, preservation, enjoyment, or allegiance. The good that we see, you know, the good that we see sometimes can be deceiving. So that is why, you know, highlighting the good as a perceived good. Because sometimes our perception of good in someone or something is correct, and sometimes there's error in our perception. So just because we see something is good doesn't actually make it good. So that's why it's a perceived good. Next is desire. So desire happens when we move toward a perceived good. So when perception says that is good, desire says, I want that good. Desire is part of love, desire is part of love because you can perceive something is good without actually wanting it. So, you know, I can see that broccoli is good. I don't want it though. I'm not desiring broccoli. I perceive it to be good, but I'm not desiring broccoli. So that's the difference between perception of good in connection and adding desire. You know, there has to be an internal pull towards that perceived good. It's, you know, it's the part of love when perceived value becomes personally relevant and motivating. So next is valuation. So this is kind of like a value hierarchy. So this is let's call it the evaluation factor of love. Valuation is the act of assigning weight to the perceived good, indirectly ranking it and prioritizing it relative to another perceived good. And one distinction that I want to make is valuation is about the object's worth or the perceived good, not the intensity of the desire. So what that means is, you know, you can strongly desire some dessert, but you value your health higher than the dessert, if that makes sense. Because those are 2 conflicting things that we perceive to be good, but one thing has to dictate how you're gonna proceed. And so when desire says, I want that good, valuation asks, will this good govern my actions if it conflicts with another one? This one, in my opinion, is the most important of all the parts, just because there are a lot of things that we want to do that we have desire for, and a lot of times those things conflict. And you know, when we go after the wrong thing, that affects our ability to love rightly. Next is commitment. So commitment is the settled orientation of the will. So even that little part in itself is kind of wordy. So I'm gonna break that down even further. So first, what is the will? The will is pretty much your decision-making mechanism. It's a part of you that actually makes decisions, that, you know, directs your actions, what you say, what you think. Second, what is orientation? Orientation just means direction. So in relation to a perceived good, your orientation is the direction that guides the will towards that perceived good. And then third, you know, talking about what does settled mean? So as commitment is the settled orientation of the will. Settled means, you know, pretty much like a firm, you know, not momentary, not reactive, not impulsive, not easily moved. It's, you know, it's a firm commitment or firm orientation. So, you know, in total, commitment is when a firm decision is made to allow the perceived good that you've given value to consistently dictate your choices and actions. Not just once, but consistently. And, you know, consistency is why, or commitment and consistency is why love has staying power. And then the last part of love is action. This is your embodied expression of that love, you know, expressed in a consistent way, usually in a pattern of actions. So, you know, love is not complete until it acts. It is, you know, pretty much the outward expression of your settled orientation toward the perceived good. Without action, there's no true evidence of that love, and that, you know, the love even exists. And without consistency of action, your love is questioned. So even getting down to this point, what if I don't know what actions to take or how to express love properly? You know, someone might say, I think I have love and my love is genuine, but, you know, the way I express it just doesn't come out right, which is fair. So I do want to, you know, look at some verses that talk about, you know, once we've gone through that progression, what should love actually look like in expressed action? In 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. 2 John chapter 1 says, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. 1 John 3 says, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And so in relation to that one, for a lot of us, God isn't calling us to literally physically lay down our lives, or, you know, he's not calling us to a physical death for the sake of someone else. You know, for some of us, or for some people, you know, whether it be military or some people in some other circumstance, you know, their walks do lead to an actual physical laying down of their lives for the good of someone else. But for most of us, that's not our call. But there is a dying to ourselves that we are called to pursue. Jesus says that, you know, we need to deny ourselves and pick up our cross daily. And what that means is we're actively laying down our selfish desires and the ways of our own will, replacing them with Christ likeness. And when we do that, that is when we are at our best in terms of having the ability to walk in love. But, you know, in my opinion, for the most part, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit in terms of knowing how to love. We know that we need to love. We know how to do it. But, you know, we kind of let ourselves off the hook a lot of times when we're not truly expressing the actions that would reflect our love. And so, you know, to me, when that happens, there's a deeper issue. And I think it's an issue of the size of our capacity to love. We might know that we need to love. We might desire to express our love to someone else, but for some reason we just decide not to do it. And that's a true issue of just the capacity of our ability to love. And so in order to deal with that issue, to increase our capacity, you know, it's direct relation to each of those parts and how aligned each of those parts of love are aligned with how Jesus views those parts. And so what I mean is, you know, going through each of those parts and seeing where I'm not aligned with God or with Jesus, and working with Him, working with the Holy Spirit to reflect on what those are, to see how you need to change, and working with Him to actually change them so you can align with Jesus's love. And so, you know, what are those parts? It's perception, desire, valuation, commitment, and action. So all those need to align with how Jesus does those parts of love. And so, you know, just quickly going through each one. Perception. Again, love starts with someone or something that we perceive to be good. So what does Jesus perceive to be good? And does that match what we are perceiving to be good? If not, then we need to work to align those things. Are we perceiving something to be good when it's actually bad? Or vice versa? Are we perceiving something to be bad when it's actually good? You know, what God says is good, like point blank. So we need to work to shift our perspective to have His perspective, so our perception can be correct. Desire. That perception turns into desire when you want to move towards that perceived good. So is the desire that Jesus has the same desire that we have? The things that He wants, are those the things that we want? You know, again, when they're not aligned, that affects our capacity to love. And so even though you might perceive something to be good, you might not have the desire to move towards it. But, you know, Jesus does. And, you know, sometimes we can also focus on the wrong desire, which, you know, kind of has to do with like how we're valuing certain desires. But, you know, there are times where in the moment we may not, you know, want to be loving. Like, for example, we might not be wanting to love an enemy, but when we shift our desire from the specific person to the desire to obey God, like we should be desiring to obey God. And so that desire should override our lack of desire to love on an enemy. So sometimes it's shifting what desire we're focusing on. And so in any situation, the best compass is to think about what God wants in the moment. And if you perceive God to be the supreme good and you want to trust and obey him, then the work should be about shifting our desire to match his. Okay. And then so next, valuation. So kind of talked about it a little bit, but you know, when we have a desire, it is likely, very likely, conflicting with another desire that we have. You know, for example, I want that ice cream, but I also want to be healthy. Which one are we going to put more value in? So much value that it directs our actions. I want to obey God, but also want to stay comfortable. That's like a huge one of conflicting desires. And the work is in making sure that you are shifting your desire to the right one. And the right one is the one that God wants. And so, you know, this is the part where the subconscious aspects of love starts to be conscious. This is where we need to really like take hold of what we're thinking, what we're desiring, and putting value towards the right things. I think a lot of times we subconsciously, you know, go after certain things out of impulse when we're not actively, you know, thinking about where we're placing our love. And, you know, when that happens, you know, without even thinking about it, we put our love in the wrong places. Then, you know, we move to commitment. After a desire toward a perceived good has been prioritized, commitment to orient the will, which is the mechanism that controls our actions. That's the next step of love. And so once desire has been given a higher priority and we've made the firm decision to start acting accordingly, that is when we've committed to love mentally. So the question becomes, I've decided to shift my will towards that desire, and am I committed to make choices that reflect that decision? Let me read that again. That didn't sound right. Have I decided to shift my will towards that desire, and am I committed to make choices that reflect that decision? That is where commitment is at. We can think something is good all day, desire it to happen or desire to go towards it, even put it at a high value. But if we're not committed to shift our will and our actions toward that thing, then, you know, a desire just kind of stays, you know, ethereal. It's just kind of like an idea. You know, it almost becomes like a fantasy. So the commitment of the will that Jesus has, the commitment part and the will part, which is, the will to act, does that match our commitment level and our will and how it's oriented? If they're not aligned, then, there's some work that needs to happen there, because that's affecting our capacity to love. And then lastly, love moves into action. Love without action is love that is suppressed or love that is withheld. So, do your actions reflect your love, or, are you just kind of just suppressing it? Do your actions consistently reflect your love? Sometimes we can express our love, but if there's not a pattern of actions in that same direction, it's kind of just kind of behavior change, versus like true love being acted out. And then, does the way you express love mirror the way Jesus expresses love? The Bible has a lot to say about how Jesus expressed his love. He's like the epitome of love. So you can pretty much read about everything that he did and connect that to love somehow. So when you put effort in bringing these into alignment with Jesus and how he does it, or how he views it, that is Christ-likeness. That is operating in the image of God that we have literally been designed from. And like I said, the Bible shows, what Jesus did for all those parts. So, check those, compare them to see if they're aligned with how you view those parts and how you do those parts. And, there's got to be work in making them align where they're not aligned. So one more time, going through all the parts: perception of good, desire towards that good, valuation of that good in relation to another perceived good, commitment of the will toward that good, and patterns of action. So love is awesome. It can be complicated, but it's a powerful thing. And so as it's the greatest commandment, to love God and to love others, we really have to be intentional about growing our capacity to love.